This, boys and girls, is how you pack a rare artifact. 2x4 box. Look at this thing. 2x4's foam on the inside, epic lid. This is how you pack something that you don't want to get broken or stolen. Oh, there's a Schlegelmilch carbine in this thing, the only known Schlegelmilch carbine to have ever been seen by Western eyes. This came out of a bazaar in Afghanistan a few years ago. Forgotten Weapons did a video on this gun, and Ian asked multiple questions that he was not in a position to answer because he was not at liberty to disassemble the gun. So we'll be, fixing this flap here so that the commission rifle, 88 commission rifle end block that fits in this thing can actually stay in or be allowed to come out. We're going to find out how this 88 commission rifle packet loading system, whether or not this actually holds it in. We think it might. A couple other things I want to look at. There was some significant damage to the stock that appears to be well repaired in a world that grinds these things to hamburger. The part of Afghanistan this came out of just grinds gun in a hamburger. Anyway, I thought you guys would like to see an epic shipping crate. All right, Bruno and I are in the preliminaries now of filming this, figuring out where we want to go, what kind of ammo it takes. We have permission from the owner to pop a few rounds. You bet I want to do that. This is going to be a rabbit hole. This is the Schlegelmilch carbine torn down in the state that I got it in. There is a significant amount of dirt on the inside of this gun. Very little rust, but a tremendous amount of just dried oil, sand, finger oil, whatever. I mean, this is the sear. It's really beefy, but man, it was filthy. So we tore the gun completely down inside of the bolt shroud. Everything on here, it's not really rust, but it did need to be conserved. The gun's been out of the stock. The bottom of the stock is clean, but everything that's up underneath something is filthy. Rear sight is bent. We're going to have to take that bend out of it, and it's very obvious how it got bent when we put it together. There's a break in it. You can see that break right there. The rear barrel band, Forgotten Weapons identified this as an incorrect barrel band. We're going to see what a regular Schlegelmilch, one of the trials guns, if they were wider. If not, we'll be able to repair this. I was able to get it apart, and we'll see. And my plan for that, we may not do it now, but it's going to be to make another one of these rear locking bands, but have this surface over here, so that the replacement part barrel band that I make will come over to about here on the stock, so that it'll lock this, albeit incorrect, but the one we have barrel band in here, and tighten it up enough that we can actually shoot this thing and not have parts going all hinter and yon. We've seen a couple of things with the flap. We'll have to straighten this flap out. This flap really got bent. I mean, it looks like a potato chip. The action here, you can see the bend in this, that when the stock was broken, this thing obviously took the brunt of it. So we'll go ahead and take that bend out of it and just make it straight again. We will not be pushing the finish on this. We're not going to be doing anything crazy. We're just going to get all the dirt off this thing and try to identify some other features. There was a broken, this pin and this end used to be in one piece with that spring on it, and this piece interacts with the sear right here. We don't really understand what's going on there yet. When we get all this gack dug off this thing, we can come back and take a good hard look at it. This through bolt that came through here had done a pretty good job of holding this together, but you take it off, you can see that crack is active. Right now, I don't want to recoil load this stock. There's a couple of reasons why not. Let me bring the light over here. Let me show you something. The grain on this stock is running this way. It needs to be running that way. This is what's called a musket grain wrist. You see this a lot on 1873 Springfields, where they were just throwing any piece of wood at this thing that they could throw at it. If this is one of 24, 25, 50 guns that they gave to Afghanistan, hey, you want a short weapon for your horse? Great. We don't know. We know nothing about this story. I know significantly less than Ian knew about it, and Ian didn't know much about it by his own admission. No one's ever seen one. So my guess is, this is my guess, they issued this thing to a bunch of guys on horseback, and this is the only one that survived, is honestly what I'm thinking. So someone else has tried to glue this. We are going to glue it again just to stop it so it doesn't snap into two pieces. There was another spot right here that you can see where the break happened, right around in here, and then obviously here the side of the magazine. Well, it blew all the way through here. This is consistent. This break is consistent with the gun having been dropped that way. If it was dropped this way, that piece goes that way, that piece goes that way, this piece goes up, and that happens right there. That gets bent. So it's real consistent with the fact that, honestly, I think this thing fell off a horse, my opinion. So I don't know, we're going to go in here, tighten this up. We're going to get a coat of oil on this thing so that it does not start to dry rot. It used to have oil on it, and right now it's got all this Afghan sand on it. All this tan you see is not the color of the wood. Same thing up here underneath the butt plate. Let me not light saturate that so much. You can see, yeah, ye gods. There's a crack here in the butt, but I don't think that's doing anything. That's just a ground the butt on the ground hard enough and it'll do that. Okay, so that's pretty much where we're at with the stock. Typically, I would say that this damage back here was caused by a failure of the bedding. And let me get that around there. And let me shine this light on the bottom here. That's a nice clean, you see that rectangular hole in here? It's clean. It doesn't look like it failed. Most of the damage on this gun was not caused by recoil. It was caused by the air-earth interface because, well, you know, gravity sucks. We've cleaned it now. That was a fade out. We were dirty. We faded back in and we're clean. Very difficult to work on equipment that's dirty. It's just very difficult. So you can see we got rid of all the schmutz on everything. The order that this will wind up going back together again in, we have this safety thing. That's a piece right there that we're going to have to make. That and that. And I swear to God, that looks like that was made out of a finishing nail, but it wasn't. We've compared this Schlegelmilch to the Trials rifles, and there's nothing in common. Nothing. So we don't really know what this plunger does when it sticks up underneath this little titty here on the block. So first thing we're going to do is, as we put things together, we'll oil it all, and then we're going to put this back together again first and take a look at what that does. We have found a plunger. It's just a drill bit. We're going to wind up making this again, but we're going to make it in two pieces because it just makes more sense to make it in two pieces. All right, let's put this thing together. Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit proud, but we'll get back to it. Okay, now we got, that's what tied it into the gun, and this particular hole right here had a screw sticking through it, and this is what was holding the takedown lever up against it like that. So that'll get screwed in when we put it in the gun, right? All right, I'm going to get a little out of order here because what's going to happen is we're not going to put this gun back together again in the right order. I'm just going to put the sear in this thing, and we're going to take a look at how this arm right here interfaces with the gun, the arm right here. We want to see what that does, and in order to do that, I'm going to do it without, I'm not going to put the springs in it. I'm just going to tack it back together again, and we're going to take a look at how this does what it does. Okay, I put that takedown clamp in there, and that's just a the part that holds it together. And the reason why I did this and pop that spring down in, and there's a little titty sticking out that holds the back end of that spring so it doesn't all crunch. Okay. Now everything's still dry. We haven't oiled anything yet, but that's fine. I just don't like having the oil get all over me. Is that we can do this. Okay, that's the position that the gun's in when it's assembled. All right, recoil shoulder here, and then there's a part that it touches down on, and then this whole thing crunches around the wood and hangs onto it. All right, well, in the middle of all that, let me get this rotated around here so that we can see it. So that pin comes up and interfaces, and when that pin's in there, you can't pull the trigger, and when that pin's out of the way, you can. And it's definitely meant to go in there. There's a saddle cut in the front end of this thing. There's like a little reverse cutout in there. So that pin, when it was in one piece, sat up in there like that, sat up in here, and there's a spring holding it up. And that spring pushes in on the bottom of this flap here. All right? So when the flap is all the way back, we don't know yet. We got to take a look. So there's a groove cut in that flap, and what it looks like is that spring-loaded pin sits in there until this thing is either all the way back, or we haven't figured out yet, or all the way forward, and in one of those positions, it pushes that plunger up into here and shuts the gun down. So it almost looks like it has a safety on it. Or, we don't know yet. We're going to find out. So we're going to have to go make that part, bend this straight, because you can see this thing is bent like crazy, like right there. We got to get all this bent because that bend affects the timing of this thing radially, how far around it is when we're doing something with it, right? So you got to get it all back. Trust me, there are no manuals on this that tell us how this gun's supposed to be put together. So I am winging it. So here's my operational theory, because there are pieces of this gun missing. When you pull the trigger, this tab is coming down and the bolt overrides and goes forward, unless you've got something sitting in there. I'm trying to get around on this here. Unless you've got something sitting in there that keeps that from happening. And that will keep that from happening until you get it up this high, and then it gets out of the way, you see? So what I think is going on was this. Remember now, this mounts here, but we haven't made the parts yet. All right? So there's the door for the magazine that I've had to fit. Now we bent all this back straight again, and we got this to where it'll come around and fit, right? This hole right here takes a rod, which is broken, so now I've made a perfect round point that fits down inside of a track that's riding on this door. So remember now, when this thing is up, the gun's unsafe. So watch. We come here, and it comes up a little bit, but right as it gets near the end, it's going to come up a lot. You see that? So if the magazine door is shut, this is up, and the trigger is obstructed. Open this door, and this will fall down, and then when you get it all the way open, it goes all the way down, and there's a little detent in there. So we're sitting here looking at this and going, well, how the hell do you get the door open? Because it's all smooth down here on the bottom. It's all smooth. So we'll turn this around here so that you can see that this is all smooth, right? So there was a lot of schmutz on this gun before, and everything was filled in. And I'm going, the whole time I'm looking, there's a set screw down here, and this set screw sets into this shaft, and it means that this shaft turns. Now ordinarily this would just be pressed into the frame, and you'd have a bearing here, and that'd be riding. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, and it just hit me. There's a detent right here. There's a little knobbins. Let me get it cross-lit. Oh, look at that. Now they show up. Now that this has been converted out, that little hole's apparent, and that little hole's apparent. Well, wait a minute. This broken off piece points right at that hole when it's shut, and Points right at this hole when it's open. There's an arm missing here with a little titty that pops down into this hole. How about that? So the gun is on safe, on safe, on safe, off safe. So if you have a rod here, all you have to do is flick that up with your finger, flop that around, hold your hand on it here, and it drops into that little detent right there, that little nobbins. I gotta make another one of these when I make the front barrel band lock. We'll make another one of these pins so we'll preserve the original part, but this is broken, and that is exactly what it is. This is the safety on the gun. The gun is off safe, and then as it comes around, watch the drill bit. The drill bit will begin to climb, boom, right there, and now it's on safe, and that's it. Kind of a gimmick, but when the gun's buttoned up, when it's buttoned up, you can't even get the sear to drop. So you've locked the sear up when the gun's buttoned up in its zero dirt configuration. Push down on the lever, flip it around till it comes over the top, and bang, you're ready to rock and roll. That little mystery was interesting. So based on that thought process, I expect, you know when somebody puts a 1911 together and they push down on the slide stop and they leave that streak, I'm expecting to find that streak on this gun somewhere. So I'm looking through here, and there's a row of pits. That's right about here. Comes right over the top here like this. And boy, wouldn't you know it, there's a freaking exit divot right there. And there's the exit divot where that piece has been popping on it. And we come all the way around, and there's the entry divot down there to the full position. So yeah, we're gonna be making one of these. I did the bore inspection on this thing, and this bore, it probably was a 318 bore, but it has been run for a century with 323 bullets, and I doubt you'd even get a 318 to spin in this thing anymore. So we're just gonna run it with 323s and not worry about it. We'll fire it on a test stand. The packet loading system inserts in here, and you can see this spring starting to fold up on me here, and that's actually tensioning what's going on. And then we'll come down until the magazine lock right here clicks. So that will go in, and you saw that pop up, and then it hangs onto the rounds, right? Now, this little add-on titty down here, you're not allowed to close the flap. So you got 5 rounds in this packet, you're not allowed to close it. You have to have it open. The only way to close it is to put a round in a chamber, and then that brought that projection down. So it appears the manual arms on this thing is drop around, shut the flap, and then it goes on safe. And we don't have the plunger in here yet because I got to go make all these parts, but this appears to be the way this thing was meant to be carried. Now, you take the first live round out of this thing and you push in. And here was the other question that Ian had. What does this do? If you push down on this and slide this in right there. So while you have that push down, that will go down, and that will actually hang onto that and allow the bolt to run over the top round, which means you could then drop a round in, go in, pull the round out, right? So it would allow you to single load, but here's the drawback. When you're set up that way, you're sticking out the bottom of the gun again. And the only way that that goes away is to turn this off. That allows the arm to push up, and now you can come back, right? Either way, it has you down to 4 rounds. It's an odd manual of arms. It's odd to just to say, it's just odd. But that's what we found out. You got a pin that blocks the sear right here when the flap is all the way shut, and when it's opened, you're off. So we got to go make all these parts. We're going to make this shaft. We got to make a couple other things, and then we'll get it all put back together again. perfect, because that'll be a dry fit. Drive that in. Now I got to measure how big around that is and know what to turn it down to. And then we can drive it, cut it off with a saw, and hand fit it. We're there. We're there. So I'm going to make this a little bit longer. By not moving the back jaw and the bottom jaw and coming off a quarter and a quarter, I'm able to slide it out, torque it down, and it goes right back to where it was. That's one of the beauties. On a 3-jaw chuck, you would not get that lucky. All right? So I gotta go find this. And I'm doing it from an angle I can't see at. I'm just making it longer than it has to be, and then I can trim it when I get in there. Just a tad more. There we go. Now we just leave the head here. We can pop this out a quarter, pop that out a quarter, and then if we need to, we can come back and go right back to it. That's us. So the idea, we made this piece that's going to have the head that rides in the track, and then we have this rod, and that's about a half a thou to a thou too big, and I'm just going to drive this in this hole and it'll stay. So that hole's drilled deep enough that we're going to be able to get away with that. Drive it all together and all be friction fit. It'll work. The next critical thing we've got to do is we're going to have to make the nose of this ride in that groove right there. Let me get this on something you can see here. There we go. I've got it on a receiver, so I got something up against the back end of it. And you can see here that that's going to have to actually be cut so that that'll fit down in that groove, right? So I'll go ahead and make the original part, that the original repop part had a nose on it that looked like this. But this thing, its derivative is all heck, because it looks like it was hacked together out in the field. And it's not right, and it wasn't supported right. And what happened was, this thing bent over like this and wound up. And the original photos of it, you can see it. It was laying in there and it mauled this circular path. It just destroyed it. So we're probably going to come in with a round file and just clean this up so that it's nice and smooth, and that there's a definite, you can see a dimple here in the very end. There's a definite, it drops into that recess right there. It is. Boom, it drops in. So that's down, and then it rides up and comes over, and then at the very end it rides all the way out. So when the door is shut, this pin is sticking up. When it's sticking up into this interface right here, you can't pull the trigger. But when the door is pulled back and open, this comes out of the way and allows you to pull the trigger. And right there, that's the first time I've actually been able to show it to you. But what I'm afraid of is I've only got about that much movement to play with. So this is going to have to be dialed in pretty tricky like. Okay, up inside the tunnel, there's a spring on this pin. That goes in there like that. And this fits up inside the tunnel here in the bottom. And that goes up inside there. That sticks up, and that part that's sticking up sticks up into here like this. Now we haven't trimmed it yet, because this will get a lot shorter, right? Yes, this looks an awful lot like a ring shank finishing nail because that's exactly what it is, because that's all it has to be. And it happened to be the exact diameter, and the other guy did it. Does not have to be made out of a piece of ordnance grade, whatever. And to be really honest, we'll be lucky if this gun gets 20 rounds put through it for the rest of its existence. So I'm not having to build something that's going to go out on a competition skeet field and get that many rounds put through it in the next 5 minutes. This spring goes over it, and then the spring goes down inside of a hole in here. Now, you can see now how that's poking down, right? So, we configured the shaft so that it was exactly the right size to fit down in here, all right? Let me get something in there behind that. Let me get something blue behind that. There we go. So we have that so that that's riding. Now, the reason why it's not in 100% contact is because it is when it's in that divot right there. I got it right where I want it, okay? So that goes in there, and then this will go here, and then we had the shaft that had that little dimple in it for the screw, but we don't care about that because we're going to make another one of those, and that'll go on there. So in this particular case, the way I have this, that shaft sticks down. You're not allowed to pull the trigger, right? Let me make sure I got this thing cocked. All right. The shaft hooks down and you're not allowed to pull the trigger, but when you fold this back out of the way, you're allowed to drop the hammer. Cock it. Put it on safe. You can't drop it. So we've solved the safety activation problem by just trimming a little bit off each end until it would just drop at full cock, okay, to where it would just go by. And I mean, it's just a little bit of tension right there. You can see it winding up and it goes right on by. This requires single point setup. It would be virtually impossible to maintain in the field, God forbid, if you got any dirt in there. So the way we found this, the shaft was broken off because they didn't have the plunger right, and it just wiped the plunger over, like I said earlier. And then what I think somebody out in the field did is they just cut this thing so short that it would never work, and just accepted that the only time the gun's truly safe is when the chamber's empty and your finger ain't pulling on it. Now, one other thing I want to show you here, Bruno's going to pan up. He's going to pan up here. You see that monitor right there? Now that monitor, whoa, look at that. That's called latency, boys and girls. Yes. However, that monitor is how I know whether or not you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so there's my finger, but as I light my finger, you see in the monitor, I can see it change. So half the time I'm pointing at stuff, I'm not looking down at the gun, I'm looking up at the monitor. Whoop, man, this is cool. And you guys ever remember max headroom? So the discussion now is going to be, how do we replace this snapped off part? Well, it'll be relatively easy to weld something on that, but I want to keep the original Schlegelmilch part original, and we're just going to replicate this. So the way we'll do it is we'll make a pin that's the diameter of the head of this thing. So we'll make a pin, all right? And then on the end of that pin, we'll cut a square so it'll look like this. All right? So when viewed from above, what you'll see is a squared off end on this thing. Okay? And it'll look kind of like this, this square bit, drive bit, kind of like this. It'll be a round pin. Just use your imagination, all right? And then we'll take a piece of stock that looks suspiciously like this. And you see that little cross I've already drawn on it. That's where I'm going to center pop a hole. And we'll cut this flat like this. Drill a hole in it and then file this hole square. So now when that square sets down inside of this, we can transmit torque. The inside of this hole, I'll kind of bevel the inside of the hole ever so slightly like this, so that when the rod sticks up through it, we can planish this with a hammer, and we'll just make a huge rivet out of the top of this, and it'll go back to kind of looking like this. Now, I don't know how they made this. I think this was done in a hammer forge. That's nice. I have no idea. One of the things that Bruno and I wish we could do, if we could go back in time, is we would love to have been a fly on a wall in one of these factories and watched how this was made. Well, now I'll have an arm, and I know how far I want it to reach because I remember where the hole was. The hole was right there. You can see that little black hole there, and then there's another hole back here on the trigger guard, right? So we know how long that wants to be. So on the end of this, we're going to cut this thing about 1/3, 2/3. We're just going to put a slice in it like this, right on the radius of where we want the locking finger to stick, okay? And right on that radius. And then we're going to roll up now, and we're going to look at the side of this. And what we'll do is we'll take this finger and we'll bend it down like that, and then cut it to length. And we'll take this big tab and we'll bend it up like this, round it off from the end like that, so that what you'll see then is this sticking down like that. That'll be the point right there. I think Bruno just did a camera move because I got off camera. So this will be what's sticking in. That'll be what you're using to get your finger on in order to drive this thing. It'll give you something to grab and just roll through with it. If you can't draw it, you can't cut it. All right? This is an awfully small part, but we got to make it. So you have to know how to draw it first in a way that you can interpret your drawing in such a manner that it makes sense to you. So we start out by turning a stud the diameter of the old pin, and then we take that stud, cut it off to length, and file a square on the side of it. We file it into a square, leaving plenty of shoulder for it to butt up against. And we drill a hole, and we broach the hole with a square needle file, and you just tap on a hammer lightly, tap it in, tap it back out, keep going, and you will slowly but surely broach that hole. It's exactly how a broach works. The needle file is tapered, just don't get greedy, tap, 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 and you wind up with a perfectly square hole that fits over the pin. And then we cut all this to size, cut it in, and here we are on the vise. So I have a countersink. I just took a slight countersink and bored it into the top here, so that when this metal flows, it'll actually planish in. Now we can heat this up with a torch. Now, because it's sitting in the vise is going to be taking a tremendous amount of this heat off, but we're just going to try to soften this up a little bit and see if it'll get soft for us. I think it will. You could do this with an oxyacetylene torch, but then you just get greedy and... Hey, important safety tip. This hammer's going to get hot while you're doing this. Allow me to reiterate. The hammer will get hot. So just don't touch the hammer. So I'm not really swinging this hammer really hard. I'm just dropping it on this stud here, and all we're doing is mushrooming the head down and making a rivet out of it. All right, so took it off, and I cooled it off in the water, and you can see here that we made a rivet that's sitting down on the collar, and now this will be able to take torque, and then we'll be able to do whatever we want to with this. So now we can go in on a grinding wheel or a sander and make this round and just make it look like a gun part. The trick here is to just get it past the gun rack smell test. It's got to look good from about 5 feet away. It's not an original part. There are no known photographs of the original part. So this is what we get. Everything is derivative from what we have right here. Make a design change because what I thought was going to work wasn't. So I don't want this to be sharp because I don't want it to scratch the finish as it goes over the top. That'll be in the open position, and I'm going to wind up putting a blob of weld over here, just right there, in order to give you something to get your fingers on. But for right now, in order to open the gun, you're just going to push up like this and it'll come around that way. I don't want this hook hanging down very far because I don't want it to flex this. So I'll keep milking the depth of that hook down until it's just a nib that's just like a little round spot there that's just enough to grab the detent. Dremels do have a place in the shop. Just make sure the sparks get thrown away from you. So when you're all done, this gets a little derivative. In order to make this just click in, I had to change thin. This isn't my final answer as far as the part. This square joint here is doing a great job of taking a load, but the issue is that little set screw down there. Where'd that thing go? Right, oh, there it is. That set screw right there is having to move all of that power through that dimple. See that dimple right there? So there's an awful lot of leverage that's available to screw this part up, and this thing can't comprehend it here. So we got that in there and it's shut. So you push up on that, bring that around, and the gun comes out of safe. You can put your finger under here or you can push up on that. But this setup is guaranteed to go south out in the field. I will guarantee you this setup will go south. This isn't my final answer, but as I do a little bit more research, I'll try to make a part for the gentleman that owns this gun that's in the style of an 1895 Schlegelmilch prototype, for lack of a better term. Yeah, let's talk about the stock. The stock was screwed up on this thing. I'm going to tell you what. The original repair that's up here was made well, and that's a good thing because that was the only thing holding the gun together. The stock had been blown all the way through, around the corner down here. This whole crack was open, and I used the non-stained acrylic glass because when I'm done, I want this to go away. I don't want you to know what I did, but I had to glue it back together again because it was one mishandling step away from snapping. Even with this bolt run through the hole and tighten down, it did not hang on to this. The energy that caused this stock to break went right around it. So we came up in here and, well, here, take a look at this. This is what this thing looked like before I glued it. And I was actually able to pull it this far apart. How low can you go? Acroglassed up in, made a huge sandwich out of this thing, and then clamped it together in some hope that I could actually just stop this. This gun's probably going to have 20 or 30 rounds put through it for the rest of its life. So as I've said earlier, if you don't wet this, it just pops right out and it all comes right off the surface. See, now there it goes. Now that entire hole is clear. You can see all the way down it there. And all I'm doing now is just cleaning this out. So we'll clean this out. I'm looking at where the recoil lug was in the stock here. And the recoil lug is bearing right here. And this is actually an indent from part of the action that pushes down on it. And we can take a look and come straight down into this, and we can see this hasn't set back at all. The end grain isn't broken, and there is a clear line of recoil flow around the magazine well, down the sides. Now, this was compromised by something other than recoil. This is not a recoil break, and typically you'll see a crack that comes right down the center when the bedding fails. I'm talking to a gentleman on the internet right now about his 1903 Springfield. I've got this really bad crack back here. Bo, it's up there. And we went and looked, and all this is split. All right. So on this gun, yeah, this piece of wood that's missing isn't going to hurt anybody. It's missing from here to here. And even if I repair this and put this back in, it doesn't buy me anything. So we're not going to do this. We're going to clean all this up, make it look like it was done by some Afghan guy back 70, 80, 90 years ago, and take it outside and shoot it. The 1895 prototype Schlegelmilch carbine. I say it's a 95 because there's no way this is after the ones that they made for the competition for the 98 service rifle. We're looking at this. We think it's made out of spare parts. It was brought back from an arms bazaar in Kabul, and God only knows what we got here. We had some issues. We had stock cracks, and in fact, I'm not going to fire this off my shoulder. I'm just going to let it run because I don't want to load the stock, even though I have repaired it. I want that to set a little bit better. We had issues here with how this safety was supposed to work. It's on safe when it's forward, and it's off safe when it's to the rear because of the plunger that's moving up and down. We have a cartridge cutoff feature that is odd to operate, and it's a gun where they were coming out of the use of the von Mannlicher packet loading system. And the von Mannlicher packet, it looks great on paper. It has issues out in the field from what I understand. You pop that all the way down until it locks in, and you're not allowed to shut the flap. The only way to shut the flap is to chamber around, and now the gun's ready to fire, or you can button it up and it's safe, okay? It also has a feature that allows you to cut the magazine off. So we'll go ahead here and put it on safe, fire around, eject, okay? And it came out clean. It appears to be in headspace. That's good. Now we can push down, engage the cartridge cutoff, and you can see that that still sits, and this will move. So then that allows you to take a, you know, with a single cartridge, I guess was the drill, drop it on top, chamber it, shoot it, eject, and you still have a full mag. Now, if you come off, that pops up and out because, well, it wasn't held in that well. So let's not do that again. And it's now covered with mud, so it's useless. And you can see part of the problem here. So I'm going to clean this off. You hold that thought. Luckily for us, we just had 16.5 inches of rain up here at the shop. So yeah, there you go. Tua, right? Yeah, I guess that's what that is. We'll stick that back in. But now, let's say now we can shut the bolt with 4 rounds, and we could also shut the lid. So then to get the gun in service, we come back around, grab a round off the top, and it doesn't go off because I didn't do something right. We'll ground another round here. Wow, we're all out of sequence. That went off. This thing's got some issues, as you can see, where now I'm covered in bugs because we just got 18 inches of rain, for God's sakes. Anyway, don't assume that you understand the manual of arms of one of these old things. Some of this ammo I've got, I'm getting really good primer strikes, and it's just not there. I guess you can kick that up, take that out, or it falls out the bottom. I don't know. I've never got it to fall out the bottom. Here, let's find out. I guess if that wasn't grabbing, the next one you put in would knock this out the bottom, and it doesn't. And we're right back to my original contention that the Von Mannlicher packet loading system had its issues. So let's see. I just did all of that. Fumbled with ammo, fumbled with this clip, fumbled with a weapon with a interesting and very fragile safety system, and I did all that while the rounds are coming this way.